Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Educated Columns Snap channel. How you doing? So today I wanted to kind of talk about maybe neglected card in the metagame. Not really neglected, but definitely one that used to be super prominent and is not. I'm sure you guys already know. We're going to be talking about Zabu, and we're going to be talking about Darkhawk. So this was the deck that I used mostly last season to climb. And really, since the nerf, a lot of people have not been playing it, but I still get questions, still get asked, like, oh, is Darkhawk playable? Is Zabu still playable? And we're going to talk about that today. So I'm sure you guys already know Zabu is still in the meta, but in a different way. You kind of see it in negative decks as a replacement to Psylocke, and that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly like a good way of playing the card, but it still can be played in Darkhawk Zabu decks. It still can be run in your old deck list if you were using that before. It's just like more balanced, right? It's not oppressive anymore, and that's the main difference. It doesn't mean it's bad, but you're not going to be completely locking them down. They have absolutely no chances, no plays. You're not going to get that feeling playing Darkhawk Zabu anymore, but it still has win cons. It's still pretty soft or pretty safe. Still has its answers. So let's get into it. I have two builds for this list right now. One with Arrow, She-Hulk, and then one with Dino, essentially. So we're gonna kind of talk about both of them, the strengths and weaknesses of both of them. This one's more closely related to my original build, but it has a few adjustments. We've taken out the Spider-Man because it's now too costly. It's kind of hard to really put in. You've taken out the Chavez as well. Just you have another 6-drop play She-Hulk that we're going to be using. So when you have other 6 drops that you do like to play, you don't have to play Chavez anymore. Like, it does give you consistency, but you have a lot of options in this list, so I don't think you need to have that consistent Chavez. And we've also taken out White Queen. So White Queen is good. It's a good card, but it's not necessary in a Darkhawk Zabu list. It's just like a nice piece, a nice addition. But if you have like cleaner additions like we do now, I don't really think you need the White Queen. So we've taken all those pieces out. We've kind of replaced them with Sunspot, Arrow, and She-Hulk. And let's kind of go through each of the cards why we have them. So we have Sunspot now. The reason we have Sunspot is because it kind of fills in the gap for some of our other plays, right? So we have She-Hulk now. She-Hulk wants you to not spend energy in the previous turn, so Sunspot will take that. Same thing with like Moon Girl. If you play Moon Girl, you might wanna wait and save your mana, and sometimes you might have 1 or 2 mana left over because of how the curve tends to go. So Sunspot can kind of eat up all that extra mana, and it's a pretty safe card since we're running Arrow. So you can go Sunspot to Arrow. That's always a pretty safe start. So it kind of just fits in nicely. So definitely not a bad card here. Next up, we have Cog. Like these pieces, we still have the Darkhawk guide in the channel, and these pieces explanations haven't really changed. So Cog, it's a very good disruptive tool, and it buffs all your Darkhawks that you're gonna play by 2. So you can look at this as a 1/4. Same thing with Black Widow. You can look at this as a 2/3. It stops the draw. It messes with their ordering of plays. And it messes with their board state. So very, very strong. And then Rock Slide, Rock Slide also very, very good. You give them 2 rocks, so you can look at this as a 4/10 if you play the Darkhawk. And it also messes with their draws, so very key pieces for Darkhawk, and that hasn't really changed. And then Darkhawk itself is the big payoff of this deck list, right? You want to play multiple copies of it. You either play Darkhawk and then another Darkhawk with Moon Girl, or you play Darkhawk Mystique, or you go Darkhawk or Moon Girl, Darkhawk, double Mystique, right? So you have a lot of ways. You can usually get around 2 to 3 Darkhawk copies on the board in a traditional game where you are going that game plan. So I think that's pretty safe, pretty solid. It's still safe. We have Scarlet Witch. This card I still like. I still think it makes sense. It's not as flexible to put in because you can't play it on 4 anymore. So what I talked about last time was that Scarlet Witch you can play on 2, on 4, and on 5 and on 6. You can still play it on 2, but now Zabu is kind of taking that spot, so it's not guaranteed to play on 2. You could play it on 3, but a lot of times you want to be playing your 4 drop on 3, so you don't really have that spot. Same thing with 4. You a lot of times want to play your 4 drop on 4, so you really only have 5 and 6 where you can put it in, but it's still good. Like that's still a good payoff. So it's a little bit worse. It's not as flexible as it used to be, but you still can win bar with no name. You still can win limbo with it. So I still like it as a nice tech tool. Didn't really find something I want to replace it with. So definitely still like that there. And then Moongirl has even more importance than it used to have. So it used to be very good for copying your Darkhawks, and it still is. But now you can also copy the She-Hulk. So that's another wrinkle we have here. If you don't get like a good start with the Darkhawks, you can now swap game plans mid battle and say, okay, we're gonna get 2 She-Hulks, we're gonna wait on 5, go double She-Hulk Darkhawk or something like that, right? So now you have this extra win con where you can put 20 power down plus the Darkhawk proc. So usually like 30 plus power on that final turn. So that's pretty good. Same thing with Arrow. Arrow is just a buster card in the game right now. So if you can put Arrow in your deck, it's probably a good idea. And I found a nice place for it. So you can do something like past turn 5, go Arrow She-Hulk. That's pretty common. Or you can just play Arrow down if you're already dropping down your Darkhawk. So you play Darkhawk, Mystique, and then Arrow last turn, or Arrow Cog last turn, or something of that nature. So it's pretty nice. You can protect your characters from being Shang-Chi'd. There's a lot of applications for Arrow. It's just a very, very strong card. So that's kind of the full list here, where it's just a ton of pieces from last build, but just put together in a new way that still works, that's still powerful. So definitely not a bad deck to try if you still have Darkhawk, if you still have Zabu. I still think it works. It just takes on a new form. And then the second deck list for Zabu, this one is more of, instead of using the She-Hulk variant, now you're using Devil Dinosaur variant. So it still kind of plays the same, but instead of relying on the waiting on turn 5, which can be awkward for some game plans, now you're always playing down big stats. So things have changed a little bit. We now have a Quinjet now. So Quinjet's really nice because you're getting a ton of draws. You have Sentinel now, right? With Quinjet, that's pretty good. You have Agent Colstein. Now this is a Series 3 card. Well, soon. It's going to be a Series 3 card soon. So it's going to be a lot easier to get this. So that's a nice way of getting very powerful draws. You still have the Moon Girl. And White Queen's back, right? In this deck, the White Queen still makes sense now because you're getting a buff for your dinosaur. And then we still have the Chavez for consistency. Now, I will say, you don't have to play Chavez, right? Once again, you could take out the Chavez. You could put the She-Hulk in. You could actually do that. It's just not as needed with the Devil Sword plays, and the fact that you tend to always have things to play, right? With the Sentinel, with the Cold Scene, with the White Queen, you almost always have things to play. So you don't actually need that She-Hulk backup plan because you'll usually have something to do. So that's why it isn't really necessary in this list compared to the last list, where you could definitely have like, oh, I don't really have anything to play. Here you're just drawing all the time. So it's hard to have nothing to do or a place to wait and waste 5 mana. So that's kind of the difference here, why we don't really have She-Hulk, but it is something to think about. But this is definitely still playable, right? The Mystique works with both Devilsaur and Dino, so it's a very flexible tool here. and not really doesn't really have any problems. So that's actually the nice thing about these builds. They still work. They're still okay. They're just not oppressive, right? And that's the one thing maybe people don't want to understand or don't want to respect. Like, you're not always going to get oppressive decks, and you don't want oppressive decks in the meta. You want decks that feel fine, have counterplay, you can still play against, but have, you know, their win cons and their lose conditions as well. So that's definitely what these two decks are. Zabu is still playable. It's just not, you're not locking them down with Spider-Man on turn 5 and then they can't play a single card. You're not getting that feeling, but you still are getting like very easily 12 power Darkhawks, you know, 15 power Dinos, double double She-Hulk Darkhawk or She-Hulk Arrow. Like, there's so much in there. It's just not as oppressive. But I just wanted to talk about Zabu since Zabu Darkhawk, since I played it. I still get questions about, okay, is this still good? Did I waste my 6,000 tokens buying this? I would say you did waste your 6,000 tokens. I did tell you, hey, I probably wouldn't recommend buying it, but you can still play it. So, you know, good news there. But overall, this is a quick video. I just wanted to address it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.